believe in yourself, seize opportunities, and just go for it.
They're some of Colorado's most remarkable citizens.
I think we have a lot to offer in every community, and I want to be sure that we're always at the table.
Women who broke barriers.
Things have changed so much in my lifetime in terms of the role of women in business, in politics, in public service.
Women who challenged stereotypes.
She was a role model to women who saw how successful she was in creating a business in her home.
They're the remarkable women who have shaped our Colorado.
I'm very proud of what we women we can do. Together, we can change all this.
Welcome, I'm Ann Trujillo. For nearly 145 years, the remarkable women of our Colorado have defined our state's direction. With the help of our partners at the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame, we want to spend the next 30 minutes sharing with you the stories of women who have truly broken ground in Colorado.
I have been a civil rights and social justice warrior for the entirety of my life. I was so impacted by an incident that occurred at the University of Alabama. I didn't understand why the governor of the state would stand in the door and declare segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. Let me just say that to each of us is born a purpose, and I am grateful that God revealed mine to me when I was 6 years old. I had not had any contact with the University of Colorado. I had no idea what the institution was about. When I arrived, there were 5 other African American students, and by the end of first year, they were all gone. And I thought about the revelation that I had at 6 years old, and I thought about my path, and I understood that there was a reason for me to be here in Colorado and to remain in Colorado for law school. So I decided that I would found the Colorado chapter of the National Association of Black Women Attorneys. I understood that not only was I to mentor African American women, but I was to serve as a mentor to anyone who wanted me to do so. Providing them comfort and encouragement and allowing them to chat with me about anything they want. Wherever your heart lies, then listen to your heart and just do what you can with the insight that anything you do will make a difference in this world.
Three, two, which to ignition and liftoff of Discovery and a team of explorers shaping their destiny.
Astronaut Susan Helms was a groundbreaker long before she became the first woman to live aboard the International Space Station.
You really get this sense that where you are is in a different place than where Earth is.
She broke barriers in 1976 when she was part of the first U.S. Air Force Academy class to admit women.
Back in the 70s, the military is one of the few places where women could get equal pay for equal work.
Being an astronaut was not part of that original plan.
I never really thought about being an astronaut when I was a kid. I probably didn't think that because women were not in the astronaut program at that point in my life.
Ultimately, Susan made 5 trips to space, including spending 6 months on the space station.
And that was an amazing time.
And now uses her experience to encourage young women to explore the science and technology fields.
If you don't feel like you do have barriers, then what you can accomplish becomes ever so much more expansive.
We used to travel a lot because my dad was a crew leader because we were migrants, you know. No matter if you were poor, you know, people will have respect for you, no matter what conditions you were. I grew up and I got married, and my husband was my neighbor, and we got married. We've been married for 68 years. We have four children. I decided I go to work, and there was this plant of carnations and roses, and it's only 4 miles away from where we live. The first thing, it was some ladies were crying, and I asked, what's going on? They said that the boss treats you pretty bad language. They don't talk, and the men that are working there is no respect for women. Just because we have a roof over our head and working 8 hours a day, there is no respect for a woman. I don't tolerate that. We decide that we're going to go on strike, and we stay there for 8 months. We call it off, and we chain ourselves to the picking line. We were changing to show that we're going to quit. But all of a sudden, they came and tear us gas where we were chained up. And it is very bad because you're choking with the tear gas because you never have experienced anything like that. The big challenge of today for women is that don't stay silent in a working conditions where you work because of mistreated, you know. That's the advice I give you today for all the women. We see, we hear, and we look at it, but we don't want to speak up. You have to have courage and speak up. I'm very proud of what we women, we can do. Together, we can change all this.
Women in Colorado were voting decades before their counterparts in most other parts of the country, and it was all women.
After women won the right to vote in 1893, Elizabeth Ensley got busy right away organizing several organizations of black women.
Up next, we'll meet some of the remarkable women who have been leading Colorado for more than a century.
It is clearly changed, and throughout our communities, and especially in Colorado, we see the opportunities that Latinas have had to be in those decision-making positions.
That is Catherine Archuleta. After serving as chief of staff to 2 U.S. cabinet members, President Barack Obama appointed Archuleta as the first Latina to lead the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, putting her in charge of human resources for 2 million federal employees. Catherine was inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame in 2020, the latest in a growing list of political inductees. That includes people like Congresswoman Pat Schroeder, state legislators Polly Baca and Wilma Webb, and former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Those are some of the names you may know, but there are also women like Elizabeth Piper Ensley, whom you may not be familiar with.
I first met her in the early 1990s when I was working on celebrating the centennial of Colorado women's suffrage. And I was reviewing all of the suffrage leaders that were at the top tier of that campaign. Elizabeth Piper Ensley turned out to be one of the officers of the Suffrage Association here in Colorado. After women won the right to vote in 1893, Elizabeth Ensley got busy right away organizing several organizations of black women. And I think by organizing women in the black community, Ensley realized that there was a way to have a voice. They had club meetings where they would practice public speaking. They would learn the Robert's Rules of Order, things like that, that because women had never been involved in politics as active players, they had to learn from scratch. Because of Elizabeth Ensley's work in this Colored Women's Republican Club and the women that belonged to it and helped organize it, they elected the very first African American, it was a man, Joseph Stewart, to the Colorado State Legislature in 1894 under the Republican ticket. And he took office the same time as the first 3 women ever elected to Colorado's House of Representatives, and also the first 3 women in the whole country that were ever elected to a state legislature. We should feel very fortunate that there was a woman like Elizabeth Ensley in this time period, in the 1890s, who chose to come to Colorado. We should be grateful that she was here and was able to make these changes that we still are working on today, but taking those first steps.
She was known as the Susan B. Anthony of Colorado.
After helping women in Colorado get the right to vote in 1893, Ellis Meredith turned her attention to the national effort.
She went to the National Women's Congress in 1893 as a way to connect with the national leaders. She spoke before the U.S. House of Representatives in 1904 on behalf of women's suffrage.
Ellis was the first woman elected to a political office in the city of Denver. Voters elected her to the Election Commission in 1910.
She garnered more votes than the 7 men in total who she was running against to win that office.
The force behind the A Woman's World column in the Rocky Mountain News, Ellis eventually became the first woman to cover the Colorado legislature.
Women weren't expected to be part of the mainstream, weren't expected to be political. They were considered to be too fragile to be able to handle politics.
And while she may be disappointed that Denver's never had a woman mayor, Colorado has never had a woman governor, and the country has never had a woman president, chances are her message to young women would remain the same.
Keep fighting. It may take a long time to achieve what you want to achieve, but keep at it. Don't give up.
As I would ride the school bus every morning over into Thornton, we'd come over a hill, and you could see all of Denver stretched out ahead of us. There was this brown cloud of smog that dominated and got worse as I got older. And that got me to thinking about the environment. I love hiking in the mountains and spending time in the mountains. I served in Washington, D.C. in the Reagan administration, and there I was in charge of the attorneys for the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So when I came back to Colorado, as my husband pointed out to me, my background was in managing attorneys. And where else do you do that in government? It's in the Attorney General's office. My biggest project as Attorney General was representing Colorado, along with a number of the other states, as a negotiator in the National Tobacco Settlement. chance, I got a call the day after Christmas in 2000 saying, please come to Washington to interview for Secretary of the Interior. And President Bush called me back and said, Gail, come back here. We want you to be Secretary of the Interior. My career looking back is a zigzag. There are all kinds of different experiences that I had that didn't really all fall together and seem like a coherent path until later on. Things have changed so much in my lifetime in terms of the role of women in business, in politics, in public service. It's also important that younger women recognize that there are those who have broken the path in order for younger women to be able to move ahead more easily.
To succeed in politics, you need to be good at diplomacy. When we return, we will introduce you to some of the Colorado women known best for uniting cultures in the homes and communities.
She believed that bringing cultural arts of any kind, visual arts, photography, literature, music, dance, into the lives of children could expand their imaginations.
An artist and arts educator, Mary Lou Anderson was inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame just over 50 years after creating the Reflections Art Program, a program still used by the National Parent-Teacher Association to recognize students across the country. Art and culture have been uniting people in Colorado since our state was still a territory. And while you may think of arts and culture as something you find at a museum or a theater, in the early part of the 20th century, people traveled from across the country to eat and be entertained in Carolina Gonzalez's Denver home.
She left in 1913 and journeyed all the way to Denver in the course of 20 years.
Grandma used to make homemade tamales, and it was after a little while that the neighborhood and various people wanted her to open a restaurant. So they finally did that in 1947.
She introduced authentic Mexican food to the non-Hispanic community. She had to struggle and fight with codes that didn't understand what Mexican food was.
I could smell the food, the beans, everything that she had made. It was intoxicating. I mean, it would just hit you when you walked in.
Culturally, it was a place where people could come and express the arts. Poetry, music, painting, and share.
It just, everybody, all the children performed, they danced, they sang, my mother sang. And it was just so unique in that sense. And the people just loved Grandma's food, but they also loved the family.
She was a role model to women who saw how successful she was in creating a business in her home. She also was a pioneer in preparation. She helped develop a molino, a corn processor, to mass produce into tortillas. That was not available technology at the time.
She never analyzed her contributions or what she wanted to do in life. She just lived life. And that's what was so endearing about her, because she was very humble that way.
She exercised love. She believed in giving back more than she received, and that you can have a healthy and successful, balanced life without hurting people, and you can help people.
Amachi married John Prowers when she was only 15 years old. Again, she was a full-blooded member of the Southern Cheyenne tribe.
Amachi Ochini Prowers and her husband are probably most well known for their cattle farm in Boggsville, a small settlement in Bend County.
It was a meeting ground of various people, Native American people, Mexican American people, Euro Americans, Americans, French, Canadians, everybody who you could think of.
Always excited to greet visitors, Amachi spoke Cheyenne, English, and Spanish, and was known as a generous hostess, providing shelter and food to those passing through.
She was expert at combining food from the different cultures, whether it be Mexican, American food, or her own native foods.
Amachi raised 10 children in her multicultural home. But more than that, she raised awareness about being diplomatic in the early years of our multicultural world.
I think Amachi is a great model for us today, a way for us to reach back and learn lessons that she was able to teach even at that early stage about how one gets along with many different people.
You can start another chapter in your life anytime. When I first moved here, I was a freelance artist, but I also worked at Laurie Air Force Base. I also worked at several print shops, and I also worked at RTD. In 1987, I had two people approach me, Robert Stewart and Ron Steele. So the three of us did get together, and we mulled around and talked about some names. The urban spectrum that became the focus of the spectrum. We do stories that are often overlooked in the mainstream publications. That's basically the scope of the spectrum, just telling wonderful stories about the African American community. I want to point out that we did start off the first year. It focused on, it was multicultural. It was centered around women, actually. It was Asian, Native American, Latino, and African American. To me, it was just like a job. You know, it was just like a job. I didn't see it where it would take me to this point, actually. I just thought that it was just a purpose. It was just a time. It was a need to reach out and have this voice for people who did not have a voice. You know, it has afforded me the opportunity to allow other people in this arena to hone their skills, get experience, and if needed, you know, go to other publications if they moved out of town, or you know, if they wanted to pursue their career in other areas. Believe in yourself, seize opportunities, and just go for it. You know, if you have a talent, you know, use it. You know, love life. You know, live it, and just be kind to people.
We hope that you enjoyed learning about some of Colorado's extraordinary women along with us. If you would like to learn more about those honored by the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame, visit cogreatwomen.org. I'm Ann Trujillo, and from all of us here at Denver 7, thank you for watching.